I'm Lisa, 29 female. I live in a small but sunny apartment in Austin, Texas, a city known for its vibrant food scene. For the last 5 years, my entire life, my passion, and my income have revolved around my food blog, Lisa's Table. It was more than a job, it was the digital home I built from scratch. This is the story of how the person I trusted most tried to burn that home to the ground, and how he forgot that I own the land it was built on. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Lisa's Table wasn't an overnight success. It was a slow-burn labor of love, born from late nights after my unfulfilling 9-to-5 admin job. It started with grainy phone pictures of my weeknight dinners and clunky paragraphs describing my attempts at my grandmother's recipes. The first year, my only consistent readers were my mom and my best friend, Sarah, but I was persistent. I invested in a decent DSLR camera, taught myself about lighting and food styling, and spent every weekend testing and retesting recipes until they were perfect. Ethan came into my life around year 2, right when the blog was starting to gain a little traction. We met at a local tech meetup he was speaking at. He was a freelance web developer, charismatic and brilliant, with a way of explaining complex technical concepts that made them sound simple. He was immediately fascinated by my blog, not for the food, but for the potential. "You've got a great eye, Lisa," he told me on our first date, scrolling through my site on his phone. "But your backend is a mess. The site is slow. It's not optimized for mobile. You're leaving traffic on the table." I was a cook, not a coder. I knew he was right. Over the next few months, our relationship blossomed alongside the blog's transformation. Ethan redesigned the entire site. He made it fast, sleek, and beautiful. He taught me about SEO, keywords, and analytics. He set up the ad revenue streams and affiliate links. He was the technical engine to my creative vision. Our skills complemented each other perfectly. He handled the code, I handled the content. Within a year of his involvement, my traffic had exploded. I was getting hundreds of thousands of page views a month. I was able to quit my admin job and become a full-time food blogger. We moved in together, and our apartment became a permanent photo studio, with tripods in the living room and racks of props in the spare bedroom. Lisa's Table became our shared project, our baby. We celebrated every milestone together. The first time a major food magazine featured one of my recipes, the first 5-figure month from ad revenue, the day I signed a deal for my own cookbook. Ethan was always there, cheering me on. He was my partner in every sense of the word. At least, that's what I believed. He would often joke about his role. "I'm just the guy in the background making sure the lights stay on," he'd say with a smile. But he was proud. When we were out with friends, he'd introduce me by saying, "This is Lisa. She's the genius behind Lisa's Table." I felt like we were an unbeatable team, building an empire from our tiny kitchen. He was the one who suggested we formalize the business. "You need to protect yourself," he said one evening as we were looking over the quarterly earnings. "We should form an LLC. It separates your personal assets from the business. It's just smart." It made perfect sense. I was making real money now, and it was time to be a real business owner. He said he was too busy with his own freelance clients to handle the paperwork, but he sent me all the links and told me which forms to fill out online. "Just put it all in your name, babe," he said casually. "It's your brand, your face. It should all be yours." I remember sitting at my laptop, filling out the forms for the Texas Secretary of State. It felt so official, so grown-up. I typed in my name as the sole member and registered agent of Lisa's Table, LLC. I paid the fee with my own credit card. When the confirmation email arrived, I felt a surge of pride. I had built this. The recipes, the photos, the brand, it was all mine. But I never would have gotten this far without Ethan. Later that night, I thanked him, telling him how much I appreciated him pushing me to do it. He just smiled and said, "Anything for my star." He had access to everything: the domain registrar account, the web hosting, the social media passwords. I never thought twice about it. Why would I? He was the other half of my life. trusting him was as natural as breathing. The success felt like it belonged to both of us. But that little email confirmation, that digital certificate with my name on it, was a quiet fact I filed away and promptly forgot about, buried under the daily grind of creating content. It was a detail that seemed insignificant at the time, but it would later become the single most important detail of my life. The end began on a Tuesday. It was a perfectly ordinary day, which in retrospect makes the memory even more jarring. I had just finished a marathon 4-hour photo shoot for a sponsored post featuring a new brand of artisanal olive oil. The kitchen was a disaster zone of dirty bowls, splattered sauce, and discarded parsley stems, but the photos were gorgeous. I was tired but satisfied, looking forward to a quiet evening of editing and maybe ordering a pizza. Ethan was supposed to be at a client meeting across town. He'd been distant for a few weeks, buried in what he called a nightmare project that was demanding all his time and energy. Our conversations had become brief and functional, mostly about blog analytics or scheduling posts. I chalked it up to work stress. We'd been through busy periods before. I transferred the photos to my computer and out of habit typed https://www.google.com/URL saw equals e and source equals Gmail and q equals listable.com into my browser to check the live site. The page wouldn't load. Instead, I got a generic error message. This site can't be reached. The server IP address could not be found. My stomach did a little flip. It was probably a temporary server issue. It happened from time to time. I sent a quick text to Ethan, "Hey, is the site down for you? Getting an error." I waited a few minutes. No reply. I tried clearing my cache and refreshing. Still nothing. I tried on my phone, switching from Wi-Fi to cellular data. The same error. A prickle of real anxiety started to crawl up my spine. The website was my entire storefront. Every minute it was down, I was losing readers, losing ad revenue, and looking unprofessional to the brands I worked with. I called Ethan. It went straight to voicemail. "Hey, it's me," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "The site is definitely down. It looks like a server problem. Call me as soon as you get this." I started to troubleshoot on my own. I logged into my web hosting account. Everything on the dashboard looked normal. The server status was green. The account was paid up. Nothing made sense. My technical knowledge was limited, but I knew enough to see that the hosting itself seemed to be fine. So why wasn't the domain pointing to it? The domain registrar was the next logical step. That was where the listable.com address was officially registered and managed. The account was under an email address we'd created for the blog, but the password was one of Ethan's, one of his complex, auto-generated strings of letters and numbers that I never bothered to memorize. He handled all of that. I sent him another text. "Need the password for the domain registrar." The hosting company says everything is fine on their end, so it must be a DNS issue. Silence. The 3 little dots indicating he was typing appeared, then vanished. My heart started to pound. Why wasn't he answering? He was the tech guy. He was the one who could fix this in 5 minutes. An hour passed. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across my messy, silent kitchen. The beautiful shots of the olive oil on my computer screen seemed to mock me. What good were they if I had nowhere to post them? I called him again. Voicemail. I left another message, my voice tighter this time. "Ethan, this is serious. The site has been down for over an hour. I'm starting to panic. Please just call me." I started pacing the apartment, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios. Had we been hacked? Was the domain expired? No, I remembered getting the renewal confirmation email a few months ago. Then a notification popped up on my phone. It was from Instagram. One of my followers had tagged me in a story. I tapped it open, expecting maybe a picture of a recipe they'd made. What I saw made the air leave my lungs. It was a screenshot of my blog's error page with a big question mark drawn over it. The user had written, "OMG, what happened to at Lisa's table?" I tried to go to the site and it sent me to this other blog. Sent me to this other blog. That wasn't the error I was seeing. My blood ran cold. I immediately opened a private browser window, one that wouldn't have my old data cached. I typed in my domain name, my fingers trembling slightly. Listable, I hit enter. It didn't show an error. The page loaded instantly. But it wasn't my page. The layout was different, a garish pink and gold theme I'd never seen before. The logo at the top wasn't my clean, minimalist Lisa's table. It was a cutesy, cursive font that read Amber's apron. And under the logo, there was a picture. A smiling, blonde woman I'd never seen before was waving from a kitchen that was definitely not mine. My domain, my address, my digital home had been hijacked, and someone else was living in it. For a full minute, I just stared at the screen, my brain refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. Amber's apron. The name was so cloying, aggressively cheerful. The woman in the photo, Amber, had that generic, polished influencer look, perfectly waved hair, a full face of makeup, and a bright, manufactured smile. The blog itself was a carbon copy, but a cheap one. She had posts for easy weeknight pasta and the perfect chocolate chip cookie. Clear ripoffs of my most popular recipes, but with shoddier photos and poorly written instructions. The About Me page was a masterpiece of vapid prose about her passion for all things yummy and her journey to share her love of food with the world. But the most chilling part was the traffic. My traffic. I could feel it, almost hear it, the hum of hundreds of thousands of followers, my loyal community being funneled away from me. Every person who typed in Listable, every link clicked from Pinterest, every Google search result was now landing here on this stranger's page. I was a ghost. My work, my reputation, my entire online presence had been erased and replaced by this imposter. Panic gave way to a surge of cold, sharp fury. This wasn't a random hack. This was deliberate. This was an attack. My mind immediately went to Ethan. He was the only one with the keys to the kingdom. He was the only one who could have done this. But why? It made no sense. To destroy our shared project? To ruin the business that was paying our rent? The denial was a thick wall in my mind. It couldn't be him. There had to be another explanation. Then I saw it. At the bottom of Amber's homepage, in the footer next to the copyright notice, were social media icons. I clicked on the Instagram link. It took me to her profile at Amber's Apron. It had over 50,000 followers, which was impressive for a blog that seemed to have materialized out of thin air. Her feed was full of the same glossy, uninspired food photos from her site. I scrolled down, my thumb moving frantically. And then I stopped. My heart felt like it had been dropped from a great height. It was a picture of her and Ethan. They were on a beach somewhere, bathed in golden sunset light. His arm was wrapped tightly around her waist, and he was kissing her cheek. She was beaming, her eyes closed in bliss. The caption read, "Couldn't have launched my dream without this amazing man by my side. He's the brains behind the whole operation. Love you." The post was from 3 days ago. While I was testing recipes for our future, he was on a beach with her, planning my destruction. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place with brutal, sickening clarity. His recent distance. The nightmare client project. The late nights he was supposedly working. It was all a lie. He hadn't been stressed. He'd been busy building a new life, a new blog with a new woman. He didn't just leave me. He planned to steal my entire career on his way out and hand it to her on a silver platter. He used his technical skills, the same skills he'd used to build me up, to tear me down and install his new girlfriend in my place. The betrayal was so profound, so multi-layered, it was hard to breathe. He hadn't just cheated on me. He had conspired to erase me. I scrolled through her feed, a digital archaeologist digging through the ruins of my own life. There were pictures of them at restaurants I'd shown him, on trips to places we had talked about visiting. It had been going on for months. I felt like a fool, so blind, so trusting. While I was in our kitchen covered in flour, happy in my little world, he was out building another one with her. The web developer and the aspiring social media manager. It was a match made in opportunistic hell. They weren't just a couple, they were business partners, and their business plan was grand theft. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text from Ethan. The message was short and brutally efficient, like a line of code. "I think you've figured it out. My stuff is gone. The keys are on the counter. Don't contact me." That was it. 5 years of my life, a shared business, a home, all dismissed in 17 words. There was no apology, no explanation, just a cold, clean severance. I looked over at the kitchen counter. A single set of keys, the ones to our apartment, lay next to a half-empty bag of sugar. He'd already moved out quietly, while I was blissfully unaware, taking his clothes and his computer, leaving nothing behind but the tools of my trade and the evidence of his treachery. I was alone in my studio, which was once our home, surrounded by the ghosts of a life I thought was real. The smell of olive oil and roasted garlic suddenly made me feel sick. The kitchen, my sanctuary, now felt like a crime scene. The first 24 hours were a blur of shock and a hollow, aching grief. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I just sat in my silent apartment, cycling through the stages of a loss I hadn't even known had occurred. I'd refresh Lysistable, calm and watch Amber's smirking face load again and again, each time a fresh stab of pain. I thought out the thousands of hours I had poured into that domain. The late-night writing sessions, the grocery bills, the frustration of a fallen soufflé, the joy of a perfectly captured photo. He had taken all of that work, all of that history, and gifted it to his new girlfriend like it was a designer handbag. But by the second day, the shock began to recede, replaced by a slow-burning, clarifying anger. The sadness was still there, a heavy weight in my chest, but it was now competing with a desperate need for justice. He was not going to get away with this. She was not going to build her vapid influencer career on the foundation of my life's work. My mind, which had been clouded with hurt, began to clear. I was a business owner, and this was a hostile takeover. It was time to stop thinking like a heartbroken girlfriend and start thinking like a CEO whose company was under attack. I forced myself to eat a piece of toast and made a pot of coffee so strong it felt like an act of defiance. Then I sat down at my desk and began to work. I couldn't fight him on the emotional front. He had made it clear he was a black hole of empathy. I had to fight him on the technical and legal front. He was a developer, but I was the creator. And I knew my business inside and out. I started by documenting everything. I took hundreds of screenshots of the redirected website, of Amber's Instagram posts with Ethan, of the date stamps showing how long they'd been together. I created a timeline of events, noting when Ethan became distant, when the domain was hijacked, and when he sent his final, callous text message. It was a painful process, like curating a museum exhibit of my own betrayal, but I knew I needed evidence. My first breakthrough came when I logged into my Google Analytics account. He had redirected the domain, but he hadn't thought to remove my access to the analytics profile attached to it. It was a rookie mistake, born of arrogance. He probably assumed I never looked at the back-end data myself, but I did. Ethan had taught me how. The irony was so thick I could taste it. I could see the traffic data in real time. I saw the catastrophic drop-off the moment he made the switch, followed by the traffic stabilizing as my followers were funneled to Amber's apron. Her site was getting nearly 10,000 to 150,000 page views a day, my page views. But the data told another story, too. The bounce rate was sky-high. Visitors were arriving and leaving almost immediately. The average session duration was a mere 15 seconds. My average had been over 3 minutes. My community knew. They could feel that something was wrong. They were landing on a page that looked and felt like a cheap imitation, and they weren't staying. This small piece of data gave me a flicker of hope. He had stolen my house, but my followers were refusing to be his tenants. Next, I turned my attention to the social media accounts. He had locked me out of the blog's main Instagram and Facebook pages, changing the passwords. But he forgot about Pinterest. I still had access to the Lisa's Table Pinterest account, which had millions of monthly viewers and was a huge source of my traffic. It was a direct line to my audience that he hadn't managed to sever. I immediately created a new pin. It was a simple text-based image, no fancy food photo. The text was clear and direct. If you're looking for Lisa's Table, please know the site has been stolen. Do not trust the new content. A new, official site is coming soon. Please follow my personal Instagram at Lisa J. Cooks for updates. Thank you for your support. I pinned it to my most popular boards. Within an hour, it had been repinned thousands of times. Comments flooded in. I knew something was off. We've got your back, Lisa. Can't wait for the real site to come back. Each comment was a balm on my wounded spirit. He had stolen my platform, but he couldn't steal my voice. The final piece of the puzzle, the one that would change everything, was a memory. It surfaced late that night as I was staring at the ceiling, my mind churning. I remembered the day Ethan told me to set up the LLC. His exact words echoed in my head, "Just put it all in your name, babe, it's your brand." I sat bolt upright in bed. The LLC. Lisa's Table, LLC? I scrambled out of bed and went to my filing cabinet, my hands shaking. I dug through a folder of official documents until I found it, the Certificate of Formation from the state of Texas. And there it was, in black and white. Governing person, Lisa Jennings. Sole member, Lisa Jennings. The domain, the brand, the ad revenue accounts, everything was an asset of the LLC. An LLC that he had no legal claim to. An LLC that was entirely, indisputably mine. He had been so confident in his technical power over me that he'd forgotten about the simple, boring power of paperwork. He had handed me the gun and then forgotten he'd loaded it for me. A slow, determined smile spread across my face for the first tee. Me and days, the game had just changed. The next morning, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. The grief was still there, a dull ache in the background, but it was overshadowed by a cold, clear resolve. I wasn't just a victim anymore, I was a woman with a plan. My first call was not to a friend or a family member, but to David Chen. David was a corporate litigator, a friend of my father S, and one of the sharpest legal minds in Austin. I'd met him a few times at family barbecues. He was a calm, meticulous man in his early 50s who radiated a quiet confidence. He specialized in messy business disputes, and my situation was about as messy as it could get. I called his office and his assistant put me right through. I explained the situation as calmly and concisely as I could, laying out the facts, the shared creation of the blog, the hijacking of the domain, the new girlfriend, the Instagram posts, and most importantly, the LLC. I could hear him typing quietly as I spoke. When I finished, there was a brief pause on the line. "Lisa," he said, his voice even and steady, "this is not just a bad breakup. This is a clear case of what we call conversion, the wrongful exercise of dominion over the property of another. It's theft, and his girlfriend, Amber, is a co-conspirator." Hearing my chaotic, emotional disaster framed in such stark legal terms was incredibly validating. "The LLC is your lifeline," he continued. "You said you are the sole member?" "Yes," I confirmed. "I have the formation documents right here." "Excellent. That means Lisa's Table, LLC is the legal owner of all business assets. This includes the brand name, the content you created, and critically, the domain name listable.com. Ethan's name is not on that document anywhere. Legally, he is a contractor you never paid, not a partner." David's words were like a shield forming around me. "He may have had the passwords," he said, "but you have the ownership. His access was permissive, not proprietary, and he has now grossly violated that permissive access." He laid out the plan of attack. It was swift and brutal. Step 1 was to put the domain registrar on formal legal notice. David's office would draft a letter asserting the LLC's ownership of the domain and demanding an immediate administrative lock on the account. This would prevent Ethan from transferring the domain to another registrar or making any further changes. The letter would be accompanied by my LLC formation documents and a sworn affidavit from me detailing the situation. Step 2 was a cease and desist letter, sent directly to both Ethan and Amber. It would demand they immediately stop using the domain, take down the Amber's Apron website, and relinquish control of all social media accounts associated with Lisa's Table. It would also include a demand for an accounting of all ad revenue they had collected since the hijack. "This will get their attention," David said grimly. "People like this, tech-savvy bullies, they operate on the assumption that you'll be too emotional or too intimidated to fight back. They rarely expect a corporate litigator to get involved." He told me to email him all the documentation I had gathered, the screenshots, the timeline, the LLC certificate. "And Lisa," he added, just before we hung up, "stop looking at her website. Let us handle it from here. You focus on your next move." I spent the rest of the day gathering the files and sending them to David's office. Each screenshot I attached felt like loading a weapon. The process was empowering. I was no longer passively watching my career get stolen, I was actively taking it back. Later that afternoon, I received a draft of the legal notice to the domain registrar from David's paralegal. It was a thing of beauty, cold, formal, and utterly uncompromising. It cited corporate law, intellectual property rights, and the registrar's own terms of service. It made it clear that they were currently facilitating the theft of a corporate asset and that they would be held liable if they failed to act. While David handled the legal front, I followed his advice and focused on my next move. I bought a new domain name, thereallisastable.com. It was a temporary measure, but it was a place to call home. I put up a simple landing page with the same message I'd posted to Pinterest, along with a form where visitors could sign up for email updates. Then, I went on my personal Instagram, which was rapidly gaining followers from the Pinterest pin. I recorded a simple, unscripted video. I wasn't wearing makeup, and my hair was in a messy bun. I just sat in my quiet kitchen and told the truth. I didn't cry, I didn't yell. I just explained, calmly and factually, that my business had been stolen by my ex-partner and that I was fighting to get it back. Lisa's table was built on trust and authenticity, I said, looking directly into the camera. And I promise you I will bring that back. Thank you for sticking. With me, the response was overwhelming. Thousands of messages of support poured in. My community hadn't abandoned me. They were just waiting for me to lead the way home. That evening, David called. "We've sent the letters," he said. "The registrar has been notified. The cease and desist letters are on their way to Mr. Ethan and Ms. Amber via courier and certified mail. The clock is now ticking." The cease and desist letters landed like grenades. According to the courier's tracking information, one was delivered to Ethan's new address, which David's office found in under an hour through a public records search, and the other was delivered to Amber at the address listed on her own LLC, which she had foolishly registered just a week prior. For 2 days, there was nothing but a deafening silence from their end. The Amber's Apron website remained live, a garish monument to their arrogance. I resisted the urge to check it, pouring my nervous energy into developing new recipes for my eventual relaunch. I was sketching out ideas for a series on resilience recipes, dishes that were comforting and restorative. It felt therapeutic. On the third morning, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Lisa?" The voice was shaky, high-pitched with panic. It was Amber. "You need to call off your lawyer," she said, her voice cracking. "This is insane. Ethan told me the blog was a gift. He said you two had an agreement." Her attempt at indignation was so transparent it was almost comical. "A gift?" I replied, my voice dangerously calm. "Did he also gift you the intellectual property of a legally registered corporation, Amber? Because that's not a gift, it's called theft." "I'm an influencer. This is my career. You can't just take it away from me," she cried. "Your career?" I laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of any humor. "You mean the career you tried to build on top of mine? You have 48 hours to comply with the terms of the letter. Take it down, all of it." I hung up before she could respond. The call was a clear sign that the pressure was working. They were scrambling, they were scared. Less than an hour later, an email landed in my inbox. It was from Ethan. It was the first direct communication I'd had from him since his curt breakup text. The tone was vastly different. Gone was the cold arrogance, replaced by a desperate, wheedling plea. "Lisa, this is a huge misunderstanding. We can talk about this. There's no need for lawyers. What we had was special, and I would never want to hurt you. I was just trying to help Amber get started." The redirect was supposed to be temporary. The lies were so blatant they were insulting. He was trying to gaslight me, to appeal to a history he himself had torched. He was treating me like I was the same naive, trusting girl whose site he had so easily hijacked. He had severely underestimated me. I didn't reply. I simply forwarded the email to David with a one-line note, "For your records." David's response was immediate. "Good, he's panicking. Let him." The real victory came the following afternoon. I received an email from the legal department of the domain registrar. It was formal and official. "Dear Ms. Jennings," it began, "we have completed our review of the ownership dispute regarding the domain listable. filed by Lisa's Table, LLC. Based on the legal documentation provided, we have confirmed that Lisa's Table, LLC, is the rightful registrant. As of 3:00 p.m. Central Time today, all administrative control of the domain has been reverted to the account associated with your LLC. The previous user's access has been permanently revoked. I read the email 3 times, the words blurring slightly. It was over, I had won. My hands were shaking as I navigated to the domain registrar's website. I logged in using the credentials David had helped me set up, my heart pounding in my chest. And there it was, listable.com. It was back in my dashboard, back under my control. For a moment, I just stared at it, the simple line of text representing my entire professional life. Then I took a deep, steadying breath and navigated to the DNS settings. I found the A record that Ethan had changed. It was still pointing to the IP address of Amber's server. With a trembling finger, I clicked Edit. I deleted the string of numbers he had entered. Then, I typed in the IP address for my new, temporary landing page, the real Lisa's Table.com. I clicked Save. A small green banner appeared at the top of the screen. Your DNS records have been updated. It was the most satisfying click of my entire life. It was quiet, anticlimactic, and yet it was everything. It was the sound of a door slamming shut on Ethan and Amber. It was the sound of my home being returned to me. I waited a few minutes for the changes to propagate across the internet. Then, with a sense of ceremony, I opened a new browser tab and typed in listable.com. The garish pink and gold of Amber's apron was gone. In its place was my simple, clean landing page. My name, my message, my promise, I was back. The immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of digital demolition and reconstruction. The moment the domain was mine again, the Amber's Apron website vanished from the internet, accessible only to those who knew its direct server IP, which was effectively no one. Her burgeoning career, built on my stolen traffic, evaporated overnight. Her Instagram was flooded with comments from my followers, calling her out for the thief she was. Within a week, she had deleted her account entirely. Ethan, facing potential legal action for damages that David estimated were well into the 6 figures, caved completely. Through his newly hired lawyer, he agreed to all our terms. He turned over the passwords to the original Lisa's Table social media accounts and provided a full accounting of the ad revenue they had earned during their short-lived charade. It wasn't a huge amount, but David made sure every last cent was wired to my LLC's bank account. I never had to speak to Ethan again. Reclaiming the blog was one thing, rebuilding the trust and momentum was another. I spent the next month working harder than I ever had before. I gave the site a complete visual refresh. It was still Lisa's Table, but it was a more mature, more confident version. The new tagline, displayed prominently on the homepage, was "Authentic Recipes for a Well-Lived Life." It was a subtle nod to the ordeal, a declaration of my core values. My first official post was a recipe for my grandmother's sourdough bread. It was a complex, time-consuming recipe that required patience and nurturing, a metaphor that was not lost on my readers. In the post, I told the full story, not the angry, hurt version, but the story of a woman who had built something, lost it, and found the strength to take it back. I wrote about the importance of owning your work, legally and emotionally. The response was staggering. The post went viral, shared across every platform. It was picked up by national news outlets and online magazines, not as a food story, but as a story of business, betrayal, and digital age revenge. The traffic to the new site surpassed even my previous peaks. The cookbook deal I had signed before the implosion was, for a moment, in jeopardy. But my publisher, upon hearing the story and seeing the massive wave of public support, was more enthusiastic than ever. "We need to add a chapter," my editor said, her voice buzzing with excitement. "The story is part of the brand now. People connect with it." We did. We added a final chapter titled The Corporate Shield, featuring resilience recipes and telling the story of the fight for the blog. When the cookbook, Lisa's Table, Authentic Recipes for a Well-Lived Life, was released 6 months later, it debuted on the New York Times bestseller list. I used the money from the book advance and the damages to move into a new apartment with a bigger kitchen and a small office space. Packing up the old apartment was the final act of closure. I threw out every last thing that reminded me of Ethan. The life we had built together was now just a collection of assets I was liquidating. My new space was entirely my own, filled with light and the smell of new beginnings. I hired a part-time assistant to help with social media and a freelance developer to handle the site's technical maintenance. I learned the hard way that I needed to understand every aspect of my business, but I also learned the value of delegating to people I could trust, people with contracts. Today, Lisa's Table is more successful than I ever could have imagined. It's not just a blog anymore, it's a brand, a community, and a testament to the power of resilience. Sometimes I think about Ethan and Amber. I imagine they learned a harsh lesson about the difference between having the keys and holding the deed. He stole a website, but in doing so, he gave me a story. A story of betrayal, yes, but also a story of strength, ownership, and the sweet, satisfying taste of justice. And as it turns out, that's a story people are hungry for. My menu and my life had been completely rewritten, and every single dish was better than before.